Yo, what is up guys, it's your boy Sami here. Today we are gonna see what if Naruto becomes the Black Mage, part 3. Hope you will enjoy the video. So before we start, please subscribe to our channel and like this video. So let's begin the video.
Naruto gave a slight smirk, raising his arms above his head, as his doll sprung to life, scaring the shit out of the bridge builder who had finally managed to convince himself that the doll was inanimate. Sakura and Sasuke were currently too busy fawning and brooding over power, respectively, to notice. A light purple aura flared around the blonde, his hair starting to lift into the air from the energy he was accumulating. Naruto. My name is Naruto. Prepare yourself. Waterga. Both arms slammed downward, the doll on his head mimicking his actions with his tails, as the water all around the teen sprung to life. A giant globe of water rose from the surrounding area, the insides churning and twisting before it exploded in Zabuza's direction, carrying a crushing force, as the agitated water surged towards the Mistnin. The shen-skinned man jumped to the surrounding trees to avoid the water, as it crushed the surrounding landscape, leveling over a dozen trees in its wake. He barely was able to avoid being caught in the spell, having jumped over it from the treetops. His hands were already starting to form anew, as he descended, calling out, as he touched down on the calmer waters behind the surge. Suyuden. Water element. Water dragon. Gathering the water literally flooding the clearing, they forced it into a roughly dragon-like shape. The water dragon twisted and twined around Zabuza, before coiling up and springing forward, aimed directly for Naruto. The teen in question looked vaguely interested in it, before he shrugged and raised his right hand, lowering it in a swift chopping motion, augmented with his magic. As the water dragon neared him, it split cleanly down the middle to hit either side of him, leaving him unharmed. The swordsman's jaw nearly dropped, as he witnessed the feat, one only replicated by his own apprentice. His shock didn't last long, however, as the boy swiftly retaliated. A pity. It was an interesting technique, but I believe it's time to end this. With that said, the doll jumped off his head, and onto the dry ground directly in front of his feet, its tail swirling and flicking, as the boy started to cast an even more powerful spell. The violet aura darkened, wind swirling around the teen, as the energy was gathered. Globules of water formed out of the air, and rose from the water of the clearing, accumulating just above the blonde. In less than 3 seconds later, the water from the entire clearing had formed into a massive blob of water above the teen's head, over 30 feet in diameter. It lowered itself in front of the boy's body, hiding him from view, as a shout broke the shocked silence. Waterja. The blob of water exploded forward, forming a 40-foot-tall tidal wave that was easily 20 feet across. It descended towards the swordsman, who was too shocked to even move out of the way of the technique, and slammed downward on top of him. The pulverizing force of the wave sent him flying through the air, and slammed him against a tree trunk, where 3 needles embedded into his neck. Naruto, his lust for a challenge finally sated, let the spell refill the drained lake, as well as disperse back into the air to replace the missing water molecules. A hunter nin jumped from the tree line, and picked up the corpse of Zabuza, thanking them, before leaving in a swirl of mist. Kakashi was both frightened and frustrated by his third student for multiple reasons. Firstly, he has shown exactly why he was a demolition specialist, and could probably even kill him. Secondly, the boy had just taken on an A-class nuke nin, and not only lived, but only seemed to be only slightly winded from the massive elemental manipulation he pulled off, without hand seals. And finally, he was frustrated, because the teen didn't die, and that his Sharingan couldn't copy those techniques. It was as if chakra wasn't even flowing through the boy at all, when he used his abilities. Sasuke's face was shadowed by his hair, as he glared heavily at the ground below him. Why? Why must he be so weak? Why did the dope of the class have so much power, when he, and Uchiha, did not? It didn't make sense. Finally, a thought broke through his angst. What if he got the teen to teach him? Surely he could use those techniques better than the dope could. He nodded to himself. He would simply have the boy teach him, and then he would kill Itachi. Sakura, well, she didn't pay attention to the fight at all. She was too busy staring at Sasuke. Tazuna was pointing at the doll, that was now in the boy's arms, unable to form a coherent sentence. Mainly words like doll alive not crazy, and out to get me could be heard, though the doll in question was currently motionless. Of course, since Sasuke was too busy brooding about his teammate's power, he didn't notice the doll had moved during the fight, and Kakashi refused to say anything about the plush toy, too annoyed that he had lost a fight to it previously. Poor Tazuna. Naruto walked back to his team, looking almost slightly happy. Nah. Must be a trick of the light. The only odd things after the fight that struck most people were that his hair was back into place, as if it hadn't just floated behind him when he was fighting, and that he was completely dry while most of the ground was muddy and squishy from the extensive water fight. Sakura was doing an impressive imitation of Sasuke's angst, as she grumbled mentally about his hair, while inner Sakura raged against the situation. Damn him, and his perfect hair Shinaro. How did he get his hair to be like that? It's better than ours. Crazy banshees with split personalities aside, the blonde simply cocked his head to the side and asked in a mocking innocent tone. What? Kakashi just sighed in frustration, while Sasuke thought about how to approach his teammate on getting him to train him, and Sakura brooded on his perfect hair. Tazuna was shaking like a leaf in a hurricane, still pointing at his doll. Slightly annoyed at the silence, the teen spoke up again. Shall we continue on to Tazuna's house now? The bridge builder nodded a bit, before walking ahead of them, casting glances over his shoulder at the doll in the teen's arms, that he could swear, was smirking at him. On the way to Tazuna's house, Sasuke finally reached a decision of how to get his teammate to train him, and spoke. "Dobe, train me." Yes, he had spent quite a few minutes wondering how he could get his teammate to train him, and 3 words were all he came up with in a rude, short sentence. Truly a modern wonder, given his awesome mental prowess. The blonde blinked in slight surprise, saw the almost smug glint in Kakashi's eye, and gave the same response he gave to the council members back in Konoha. "No. If you want training, get our teacher to do it. Don't bother me with your petty revenge kick." Sasuke fumed, turning to give the blonde the full force of his patented Uchiha death glare, and asked, "Why wouldn't you train me?" Naruto struck a thinking pose, placing the doll on his head, as he narrowed his eyes, as if viewing into the distance, an index finger tapping his chin. After staying that way for quite a few minutes, in which the remaining group had stopped to watch, he seemed to reach a decision, and gave the Uchiha his answer. "I don't want to." Sasuke nearly exploded in fury at this statement, as everyone wanted to train an Uchiha. Clearly, the blonde must have not heard of the clan's greatness, and was about to explain just why the Uchiha clan was so great when the blonde elaborated his answer. "My techniques are personal, and I refuse to teach anyone else how to use them. Don't even try stealing them with that thieving eye technique of yours either. My bloodline allows me to use them without hand seals, meaning you couldn't replicate the effects without years of trial and error." Kakashi's eye narrowed in suspicion at this supposed bloodline of his. Nobody was able to get around the power of the Sharingan. The only technique that was unable to be copied was the Rasengan, spiraling sphere, as it was pure chakra manipulation. But this boy didn't even use chakra, or else his eye would have seen it. His mind entertained the thought of his student using demon energy to use the techniques, and started to believe his student was the Kyuubi, not the doll. He turned his head to glare at the blonde as they continued on to Tazuna's house. If the boy wouldn't teach Sasuke willingly, then he would force him. They finally reached Tazuna's house, with both Sakura and Sasuke in the middle of an internal long trance about different parts of their blonde teammate, and Kakashi contemplating how to force the blonde to train the Uchiha. The men's house was actually renovated in, so they were able to each get a room to themselves. Dinner was a quiet affair, though it was quite delicious, as Tazuna's daughter, Tsunami, was quite the cook. Her son, Inari, however, spoiled the meal with an outburst of "You're all going to die. Nobody can stand up to Gato," before the child stormed up to his room. Naruto looked up to the plush toy on his head, and had to hold in a snort of laughter, as a thought presented itself to him. That boy could teach Sasuke how to truly angst. His little black cloud of gloom was twice the size of Uchiha's. Truly, that one must be some form of prodigy in the arts of brooding. After bidding the family goodnight, Naruto headed up to his room. He placed a magical ward or two against intruders around the room, before slipping into bed, holding the fox doll to his chest. The next morning, as they all headed down to breakfast, with Sakura's angst intensified when she realized that her blonde teammate's hair was just as perfect as ever, Kakashi decided to greet them in his own unique way. "Zabuza is still alive." This caused Naruto to snicker a bit, causing Sasuke and Sakura to break out of gloom and doom mode to glare at him. Kakashi also joined in on the glare, not liking to be made fun of. "Something you find funny, Naruto?" The blonde in question pulled an innocent face, though his purple eyes seemed to sparkle in impish delight, as he replied, "Well, I'm just surprised it took you this long to realize the Hunter Nin was a fake. I was just toying with the man, though if I really wanted to kill him, I would have used lightning techniques instead of fighting water with water. You didn't really think he'd die from a water technique, did you?" The Hunter Nin placed him in a near-death state with the needles hitting a vital pressure point in his neck. From taking a nearly direct hit from the water, as well as the stress placed on the body from the near-death state, he'll be out of it for a week or two. Kakashi's glare intensified, as he sent Sasuke and Sakura down to breakfast without them, saying he needed to speak with Naruto about something. As soon as he was sure they were out of earshot, he rounded on the genin, his one eye nearly blazing in fury. "If you knew he wasn't dead, then why didn't you kill him?" The boy met his glare, lips twisting in a slight sneer. "Because the man actually has honor, unlike you, a thief. I know you were trying to copy my abilities while I was fighting. Don't you have any grace at all, or do you always copy from your own comrades?" The copy nin sputtered a little in indignation at the accusation, while the blonde walked down to breakfast, pulling his doll off his head, and placing it securely in his left arm. Outside, 3 hours later, Kakashi had told them that he was going to train them, finally, so as to be able to correctly fight Zabuza and his accomplice. Naruto could barely hold in his laughter at the exercise they were going to do. Tree walking. That's the basis of control of all energies, and the man was only now teaching it to them. Sensing that one of his students wasn't awed at the feat of walking against the flow of gravity directly upward, he glared at the offender, finding it to be the one he hated most. Deciding he would wipe the non-existent smirk off the teen's face, he called down to him from upside down on the tree branch. "Naruto, since you don't seem to be surprised at all by this, how about you go first?" The blonde simply let out a derisive laugh, with a mocking reply. "Sure thing, Haddock-san." He walked slowly towards the tree, not stopping at all to gather his energy. As he walked directly up the trunk, his pace not wavering in the least, as he went all the way to the top before backflipping off the top, landing barefooted on the ground without even a thud. Kakashi's glare intensified, as he decided to put his plan into action. "Naruto, can I speak with you for a minute?" The teen simply shrugged his shoulders, still holding on to that accursed doll in one arm, as he followed his teacher out into the woods. Once they were out of sight or earshot of his two teammates, the teacher rounded on him, and he could feel the arrogance and smugness emanating off the man. "I order you, as your sensei, to teach Sasuke your techniques. You have far too much power to be a genin, and Sasuke needs that power to get his revenge on his brother." Naruto's left eyebrow twitched once, twice, 3 times, before finally answering the man, a disbelieving look on his face. "Do you really think that, if the council failed to order me to do so, that you would succeed? I will give you this one last warning, Haddock. Do not fuck with me, as I am not to be trifled with." To further prove his declaration, his leg shot out in a snap kick, which landed solidly on the Jounin's chest. The blow caused all air to rush out of his lungs, leaving him winded and gasping for breath, doubled over with his hands on his knees. The blonde disappeared off into the forest to do his own training, not to be seen for the rest of the week, much to Sasuke and Kakashi's irritation. 6 days later, twilight in the forest. Naruto was currently sitting against a tree, eyes closed, as he worked on trying to blend 2 elements together. He was almost succeeding, but something was missing. He was broken out of his meditation, as he felt another person enter the clearing with the stealth of a shinobi. One purple eye opened slightly, so as to continue the illusion of being asleep. The intruder upon the clearing was a little shorter than him, and looked quite feminine. They were wearing a pink kimono, and held a basket on their left arm with a few herbs inside it. The figure had long brown hair, and was currently approaching with their arm outstretched to gently shake him awake. His eyes snapped open completely before the person could touch him, causing them to back away in slight shock and fright. Sensing no inherent malice coming from the other person, he relaxed a little, and tried to find out why the person seemed so familiar. "Sorry about scaring you, but I don't like being touched." The woman nodded a little, her brown eyes sparkling in a bit of sadness and understanding. Naruto was confused at that part, and blinked a little in shock, as she seemed to recollect some memory of a distant past, if her misty gaze into the air were any indication. Her soft voice carried a hint of sadness, before she snapped out of her daze. "I understand. Sorry about waking you." Naruto shook his head slightly, before standing up with a stretch, his doll situated atop his head. "Don't worry about it. I was awake by the time you entered the clearing. Why are you out here, anyway?" The girl seemed to be slightly shocked that he was feigning sleep the entire time she saw him, before answering, one hand gesturing to the basket on her arm. "I'm gathering medicinal herbs to help someone close to me. Would you like to help?" The teen decided he might, as well as helping her might help him remember how he knew her. As he helped her gather different herbs to staunch bleeding, promote faster healing, and ease pain, he realized who she was. "So Hunter-san, how's Abusa-san doing?" The girl stiffened and backed away. She hadn't brought any weapons with her when she had gone to collect herbs, and this boy was certainly terrifying in the power he wielded. She decided that, if he hadn't attacked her yet, she might have a chance. "He's doing alright, though I'm curious to know how you knew I was the Hunter-nin." The blonde gave a soft chuckle, pulling the doll off his head, and setting it on the ground. "The herbs you are collecting are the same ones I had to use back, when I was training with my water manipulation. The bludgeoning force of water causes pain, as well as internal bleeding, and the needle trick you pulled would have put some heavy stress on the body. Would you mind if I accompanied you back to Zabuza-san? I wanted to thank him for providing a challenge for me, as I haven't had one in well over half a year." The woman nodded slightly, for fear that, should she refuse, the boy would attack her. She was considerably surprised when the doll lifted the basket's handle using its tails, and walked beside them, as they headed towards their base. At her shocked, and slightly curious stare, the teen decided he should give her a half-truth. "Part of my bloodline allows me to animate inanimate objects. When I use stronger techniques, I use my doll to help me in my manipulation. Surely when you were watching the fight, you noticed how it moved." The woman nodded a bit, still curious about the plush toy. She gave him a slight smile, and decided that, since he told her about his bloodline, she might, as well reciprocate. "I see my bloodline allows me to use Hyoten, ice element techniques. I've never heard of your kind of bloodline before, though. Is it rare?" The blonde nodded slightly, before his lips twitched upward in a slight smile. "I'm the last of my line, I believe. I've been trying to recreate fusion elements through my manipulation, like ice and wood, but something is missing about it. Perhaps, should we both live through this mission, could you give me a hint? The woman was a little shocked at that, as she didn't think anyone would be able to recreate her bloodline's ability. However, this boy seemed to be like her, almost. Before she could answer, she had to ask him another question, as they were within sight of the base by now. I'll think about it, but tell me, why do you fight? The boy's lips curled into a sad smile, startling both her and the doll, as the boy nearly never showed his real emotions. His voice had a haunted, faraway aspect to it. I fight for a promise I made to one who became my family. I promised her that I would take care of myself. The woman gave a sad nod before replying. I fight for those that are precious to me. To protect my precious people, I will encase my heart in ice and become a true shinobi, should it be required. My name is Haku, by the way. The blonde gave her a slight smile and nodded politely. Precious people, my name is Naruto. Haku opened the door to Zabuza's room to find Gato berating the man for not killing the bridge builder. The blonde skillfully hid himself in the room, using a complex weave of mana to seem to sink into the wall. In reality, he had simply disguised himself as the wall, letting light pass through him. After Gato tried to strike at Zabuza's supine form with his cane, which caused Haku to blur into action, catching his wrist and snapping it like a twig, he left, calling out that they would pay for their insolence. Naruto had to stifle a snort at that, as the man's bodyguards were simply pseudo-samurai with no real abilities, besides knowing how to use crude, drawing techniques. Zabuza finally took notice of the fox plush carrying the basket of herbs, and spun his head around, looking for the blonde who owned said doll. The boy appeared from the wall, startling the recovering man, though he couldn't sense any ill intent from the boy. The blonde held out his hand in a peaceful gesture before speaking. I simply wanted to thank you for actually posing a challenge to me. It's been well over half a year since I had to go that far. Plus, I thought you had honor when you agreed to a water fight, instead of using your specialty of silent killing to try to blind me and assassinate me with your sword. The man grinned from the bed, showing off pointy teeth as the mask of bandages was absent, before replying. Sure thing, brat. Only Haku can usually keep up with me when I start to use water, though yours are considerably more destructive. The blonde gave a slight smirk at the description, before picking up his doll and handing the basket to Haku. He sat on the edge of the bed and scratched behind the fox's ears. I'm a destruction specialist, as I use wide-scale elemental techniques of all elements to overwhelm and destroy. Haku has real talent though, but not on the battlefield. She seems a little too gentle for that. However, when I was training with my mentor a while back, she told me something that holds true to Haku. Anyone can destroy, but only truly skilled people can heal. At the time, I thought she was talking about the control required for the healing techniques, but I think now I realize what she meant. It's considerably easier to kill someone, and not think twice about it, than to heal the wounded. Haku smiled a little at this, and Zabuza seemed to think it over before nodding. The fox doll gave a toothy grin, before speaking, which surprised both Zabuza and Haku. Took you long enough to figure that out, brat. The crazy bitch always was telling you stories about her friends, and it took you this long to realize what she was talking about. The blonde glared at the doll, before retaliating. No more ear scratches until we're back in Konoha, for that. Plus, you're not supposed to talk around other people. The fox doll looked absolutely stricken at the news, his normally menacing red eyes tearing up, and widening into a kick puppy look. His ears laid back against his head, and his tail seemed to droop. Haku almost squealed kawaii at the scene, and Zabuza was intrigued. I noticed your doll could move, but I didn't know it could talk. Naruto scratched the side of his cheek sheepishly, while the doll was brokenly sobbing in Haku's arms. My doll has a soul, but since it's a Kyuubi doll, I normally won't let him talk, as most of Konoha already want to tear him limb from limb for just resembling a fox. If he were to speak well, you know. The Carrierin snickered at that, as they both watched Haku squeeze the life out of the doll in a hug. Anyway, I came to tell you also that Haddock is trying to train my two teammates to get ready for a second battle, should you attack again. Though if he orders me to teach Uchiha-sama again, I swear I'll turn him into a statue. The man has absolutely no honor, as he tried to steal my techniques with his implanted eye while we were fighting. Thankfully, he was too busy staring at me to steal your dot. Zabuza was considerably shocked at this. What kind of teacher tries to go behind their back to steal their own students' techniques? He cracked a slight grin at the lack of respect for the Jounin, his own respect for the famed copy nin, taking a hit from the news. After bidding a fond farewell to Haku and Zabuza, Haku tried to find out if dolls could suffocate in hugs, while Zabuza and Naruto snickered at the poor fox's predicament. Naruto headed back to Tazuna's house. Unfortunately, the two nuns were still going to attack the bridge builder, as it was their job. However, that didn't mean that, should they attack, Naruto had to let them die. He cradled the traumatized fox doll in his arms, who was muttering about crazy ice bitches and killer hugs of doom, lightly scratching behind the doll's ears, as he headed through the forest back to Tazuna's house. He entered without a sound, before going back to his still warded room, and slipping in quietly. The next day, 8 a.m. Naruto woke to a woman screaming, who sounded oddly like Tsunami. He hopped out of bed, slipping on an identical outfit almost absent-mindedly, as he picked up the fox plush. He cradled it in one arm, as he sprinted down the stairs, and out the back door to see an odd sight. Inari, tears streaming down his face, was charging the two hired pseudo-samurai with nothing but a butcher knife as his protection. Tsunami was currently bound, and gagged in between the two men, as they leer predatorily at the approaching boy, hands on the sheaths of their swords. Naruto blinked a little at the suicidal boy, wondering if his mother meant so much to him that he'd lay down his life in a futile effort to free her. He gave a slight shrug, before casting a spell that seemed fitting to the situation. Break. The single word caused all people to look towards him, his fox doll in hand, as his arm was outstretched towards the two samurai. They were about to jeer at him about how his technique didn't work, before they noticed their arms and legs were stiffening. They looked at the boy in pure horror, as they felt their entire bodies become stone, the sensation incredibly foreign and terrifying to the mercenaries. Inari and Tsunami just looked on in awe, as the two men were petrified, before Tsunami shrieked in fear, as Naruto gave both statues a swift kick, turning them to dust. He undid her bindings, and gave her a slight smile, before disappearing in a swirl of water. Do not feel bad for them, as they deserved every moment of it. Be glad that they only suffered a small amount, for their crimes against the country were grave. Take care of Inari, Tsunami-san. At the bridge, Haku currently had Sasuke trapped within one of her personally created techniques, the Makyo Hyosho, demonic eye smears. She was currently reflecting from mirror to mirror, throwing volleys of needles at the boy, trying to avoid killing if she had to. Sakura was protecting Tazuna, and Zabuza was hidden in the mist, fighting against Kunai against Kakashi. Naruto arrived just as Haku had finally lost her temper at the Uchiha's arrogance, believing that he had won, as soon as he had unlocked his. To prove him wrong, she threw needles into his neck, sending him into a near-death state. She wasn't quite ready to make her first kill, and she let her technique drop, watching Zabuza's fight with Kakashi. The blonde appeared next to her, looked at the body of Sasuke riddled with needles, and snickered. He bowed to Haku, stating in a mock-respective tone, "Haku dono, I bow to your greatness at shutting up Uchiha-sama." The girl gave a soft laugh, before taking off her mask to continue watching Zabuza's fight. The Nukenin was currently winning, though he had a few wounds of his own. Kakashi had a spark of genius, and unrolled a summoning scroll, calling out his technique, as he did hand seals, and wiped his blood across the kanji. Kuchius, Doten, Sugano, summoning, earth element, tracking fang technique. Multiple summoned-in dogs disappeared into the ground, before resurfacing underneath Zabuza's feet. They all piled onto him, biting deep into his arms and legs to immobilize him. Haku gave a slight start, as she realized her mentor was in trouble, but Naruto held onto her shoulder firmly, his serious gaze looking slightly less grim due to the fact that he had a fox plush on the top of his head. "Haku-san, please allow me the honors of screwing up this attempt on your mentor's life. If my senses are correct, Geto is actually heading this way with a large force of mercenaries, and I don't think they're for us. You need to be in top condition, just in case." With that said, the fox doll hopped down to the ground at the blonde's feet. He concentrated intensely, as Kakashi bragged about his original technique, the air starting to swirl around the blonde, as a violet aura erupted to life. He whispered a soft blizzaga before his eyes snapped open, the glittering purple orbs focusing intently on a spot just in front of Zabuza. The air chilled dangerously in that area, before ice crystals started to form at a rapid pace. Zabuza only had an instant to wonder if it was Haku protecting him before the crystals slammed into each other, and exploded in growth, creating a 4-foot thick block of blue ice. Blocking Kakashi's piercing jab of the Chidori, 1,000 birds. The lightning faded from the copy nin's hand, as he searched for the source of the ice barrier. Before he could find the source, a sound of mocking clapping resounded through the mist, before Zabuza lifted it to see their audience. Geto, with about 300 mercenaries, stood at the end of the bridge, and was sneering in his direction. The summoned-in dogs disappeared in a poof of grey smoke, as a single needle hit the summoning scroll, destroying the technique, and releasing Haku's mentor. Zabuza stood, and glared at the wealthy man, asking what he thought he was doing with a force like that. The arrogant little man replied that, since he and Haku weren't doing their jobs correctly, he was just going to kill them with the Konoha ninja, using the mercenary force. Haku bristled at that, before teleporting to her mentor's side with an ice mirror, and running a quick healing technique to start to patch up his wounds. Zabuza looked to Kakashi, who was glaring at the ice wall, and simply stated that his mission was over, and that they didn't need to fight any longer. The man reluctantly nodded, more because he was tired, and probably couldn't kill the Nukenin, due to putting so much of his chakra into his attack. Naruto grinned, and walked over beside them, the ice shattering, and melting back into water before evaporating into the air. The Kyuubi doll was in his arms again, as he spoke, shocking the three nins. "I will take care of them. Kakashi, you go tend to Sasuke, as he's in a near-death state due to needles, and Sakura's currently bawling her eyes out over his corpse. I also think she's going to try to embalm his body and keep it as some sort of souvenir or something, so you might want to hurry. The Jounin looked up in shock and fear before sprinting over to his student's side. Zabuza and Haku were snickering at the thought, and Naruto shocked both them and the doll in his arms. He gave them a true warm smile and extended a hand in a peaceful gesture towards them both. Allow me to do this, for while I'm not sure I quite get the concept, I do believe I want to protect you both. I suppose you could say you both have earned my respect and have been added to my short list of precious people. Before waiting for a reply, he strode gracefully to the center of the bridge, about 30 feet away from the bloodthirsty mob of mercenaries. He set the toy down at his feet, and a dark purple aura flared to life around him. His hair started to rise from the energy gathered, billowing out behind him as the wind picked up. The mob of villagers who had come to the bridge, as well as Sakura, Kakashi, Zabuza, Haku, and the newly revived Sasuke, looked on in awe at the sight as the aura darkened more, and started to glow brighter. The teen spoke, his voice a chilling monotone, as he gazed in clear disdain at the mercenaries, before he raised his arms above his head. Your arrogance and greed sicken me. Prepare yourselves, for I will show no mercy. The greedy little midget laughed at this, asking what a girly boy would be able to do to him and his well-paid mercenaries. The doll came to life, its tails flicking to and fro in a hypnotic manner, though hidden to those behind the blonde due to the position of his feet. Most of the mercenaries stepped back in fear at the sight, however, but were unable to escape, as a single word was murmured loud enough for all to hear, before both the blonde's arms descended. Ultima. The scenery descended into darkness for all, not just those caught by the spell. Odd flickers of light flashed brightly, before they condensed around the mob of mercenaries led by Gato. They formed a sphere, before condensing and brightening. Finally, an explosion of power erupted from the center, blinding everyone with a bright white light, as shockwaves of energy ripped every last one of them apart before disintegrating the remains, and then the darkness receded. The bridge was, astonishingly enough, unharmed, though it was marred by the blood of hundreds having been spilled by the spell. All the onlookers had their jaws touching the floor from the raw destructive power of that one attack, before the boy scooped up the plush doll and turned to face them. He gave a slight shrug and said they deserved it before walking off. The next day, they were just about ready to leave when Haku approached Naruto with a slight smile on her face and whispered in his ear. The blonde visibly brightened and actually gave the woman a hug, nearly scaring the poor doll on his head out of his wits. The ice user then teleported away through an ice mirror and left with Zabuza to continue wandering. When questioned later, the blonde would say she gave me a hint on something. On the way back to Konoha, however, they ran into a bit of trouble. As they stepped out into the same clearing that Naruto and Zabuza ravaged in their water fight, two presences made themselves known by stepping out of the tree line. One was a rather tall, bulky shark-like man, with blue-tinged skin, dark blue hair, gill markings on his face, and a bandaged object on his back. He also had a slashed misstate. The second, however, was quite recognizable. He was shorter than his companion by about a head, yet carried himself with grace and an air of indifference. His hair was long and black, tied back in a ponytail falling in between his shoulder blades. He had two markings on either side of his nose, like diagonal slashes. They looked, oddly enough, like bags under his eyes. What really sparked the familiarity were two red eyes, each with three tomos spinning around them in a hypnotic manner. The slashed Konoha hit I-8 was what sealed the deal. This man was Uchiha Itachi. The two both had bamboo hats with strips of cloth dangling from them in their hands, bells tied to the ends of the cloth jingling a little with each movement. Naruto, seeing a chance to forever piss off his teammate and possibly find out what his class Nukenin wanted at the same time, decided to do something he would never have even dreamed of in a normal situation. He looked at Itachi, who stared emotionlessly back, before looking at Sasuke. He then struck a thinking pose, with the doll situated on his head. Quickly drumming up his courage, he did the unthinkable. He squealed in a perfect imitation of a fangirl, causing everyone to look at him like he lost his mind. He quickly sculled his face into that of a love-struck fangirl, and turned to Sasuke, stars in his eyes. You never told me you had an evil older brother. This, of course, caused Sasuke to break out of his shock and yell at Itachi, before charging his elder brother, who simply backhanded him across the face without even looking, knocking him out, and slamming him into a tree. Kakashi, worried about the Uchiha heir's health, rushed to his side, along with Sakura. Naruto regained his composure, though the doll on his head had to be moved to his arms to stifle the hilarious laughter emanating from it. Naruto walked forward slowly and nodded politely to them both. So I'm guessing you two needed something with me. By the cloaks with the pretty red clouds, I suppose you're Akatsuki. They both nodded, a little shocked and afraid of his rapid mood swing, and Itachi was having issues repressing his fangirl sense, as the blonde had dredged up bad memories. As his team was currently indisposed with caring for a knocked-out Sasuke, he shrugged and asked the obvious question. What do you need? Itachi was the one who spoke, stepping forward a little, and settling his unnerving gaze on Naruto's purple eyes. His voice was soft, but carried a tone of authority to it. We need you to come with us, Naruto-kun, as we are interested in you. The blonde lifted one eyebrow, before holding the plush toy out in his hands. Itachi looked at it for a second, before lifting his own eyebrow in silent question. Naruto decided to elaborate for the slightly confused elder Uchiha. I had him sealed into this stall when I was 3. If you're going to take him somewhere, I'm coming with you. He gets pissed when I'm not there, as I control his usage. Kisame started to snicker at this, and Itachi's lips started to twitch, as if he wanted to laugh. The plush doll, however, didn't find this funny at all, and flicked his fluffy tails in agitation. There's no way I'm going anywhere without the brat. I'm having too much fun being his weapon of mass destruction, damn it. Kisame looked over at Itachi, barely muffling his laughter at the great Kyuubi no Kitsune sealed into a squishy plush toy. Itachi looked back at him, and nodded, before turning back to Naruto. We may have to come back after speaking to our leader about this. He may want you to join Akatsuki. We only wanted the power of the Bijus by extracting them from the Jinchuriki, but since yours is sealed in this stall, I suppose we could maybe use you, as a member, provided you wish to join. The blonde cradled the doll in his arm for a moment, before placing it back on his head, and tapping his chin. His answer, however, caused Kisame to fall flat on his face. Will I get to wear an awesome hat like yours? And maybe get a smaller one made for Kyuubi? Itachi actually seemed to smirk at this, before nodding. He then said come, Kisame. Before they both disappeared in a puff of black smoke. By now, Kakashi and Sakura had ascertained that Sasuke was going to be alright, and came back into the clearing, an unconscious boy cradled in Kakashi's arms. At Kakashi's question of where did they go, Naruto just shrugged, and said dunno. The gray-haired man didn't think to question the blonde further, and started off at a faster pace to Konoha to get Uchiha-sama to a hospital. Naruto jumped to the trees, taking a faster route to Konoha, as he held an in-depth discussion with his doll. They both reached a decision, just as they came through Konoha's gates. He disappeared in a swirl of lightning, shocking all the villagers nearby who never saw a Shunshin like that, and further scaring them when it echoed in a resounding boom of thunder. In the Hokage's office, Naruto had appeared while the Hokage was just about to take a paper off the top of the stack of his paperwork, and the lightning elemental Shunshin's thunder caused him to stumble, knocking the stack over onto the floor. The aged man glared heavily at the evil paper, before addressing the boy in his office. Naruto-kun, you're back early. Was there something wrong with the mission? The blonde shook his head, and told Sandaime all about the mission, including that they encountered 2 Akatsuki members who wanted to take him away, before making up some story that he had distracted them. It was a half-truth, damn it. The aged man bought it, however, and adopted a grim look on his face. This is grave news indeed. Naruto adopted an exaggerated thinking pose, before seeming to wonder aloud. I dunno, I may have to ask about joining them. They have these awesome hats. The Hokage, nicknamed God of Shinobi, and the professor fainted. Meeting Guy, and Kakashi's mask. Naruto had decided that enough was enough. He was going to take something so dangerous, so incredibly risky, that not even the Hokage could classify it as a mission. Many shinobi have asked for it as a mission when they were feeling suicidal, and not even the Hokage would force them to suffer the fate of those who failed. He sent them on standard high-profile assassination missions instead, as then their deaths would make the target more arrogant about their bodyguard system, making them more susceptible to real assassinations. The mission Naruto had in mind would shake Orochimaru to the core at how impossible and daunting the task seemed. The man created a probable way of immortality, but this was too much for even him. He was going to find out what the fuck Kakashi's face looked like. If Naruto's theory was correct, this would be the ultimate in blackmail material. He had hypothesized that either his Haddock's face looked absolutely marvelous, and he could threaten to spread the photos around, or the man looked hideous behind that blue face mask, and didn't want to feel ashamed of his looks. His final theory, though plausible, was highly unlikely. Perhaps the man had an incredibly unmanly tattoo on his face. Either way, that goddamn mask was going to go. After relaying his mission to his doll, the plush's eyes had widened, and mumbled "You're too young to die," before yelling at him in the privacy of his own home. I'm the fucking Kyuubi no Kitsune, and even I'm afraid of the consequences of failing that mission. The Black Mage gave a grave nod, before making one of the most potentially suicidal decisions of his life, with an even higher fatality risk than disguising yourself as Uchiha Itachi at the annual Fan People Convention, based in Wave Country. Those fiends would rip you apart, just wanting to have a piece of Itachi. He had heard that someone made a fortune by somehow managing to gain a hair from his eyebrow before, and he shuddered to think of what vital organs would sell for. I don't care. I will finish this mission, and I will be alive at the end of it. That man's face shall be shown. And so started what would later be renowned throughout the elemental countries, as the time when a 15-year-old Genin defied fate itself, and attempted the SSS class mission of unmasking Haddock Kakashi. He quickly packed a bag with things needed for this mission. Clothing, a high-definition camera, and his plush toy, which was safely situated on his head. He tied back his bright blonde hair, and used raw mana manipulation to alter the appearance of it, giving it a dull black color that seemed to absorb all light. He was absolutely ready. However, Kyuubi was gnawing on his stuffed fingernails in fear of what would happen should they fail. He wanted to get one thing off his chest before they set out. If anything happens to you, I want to tell you that you're like the son apprentice sibling I never had, and I'm proud that you inherited my sadism and fighting spirit. I also wanted to let you know that, when you see Lulu on the other side, to tell her I hate her for calling me fluffy, but I love her for giving you weapons of mass destruction, me included, at your fingertips. The Black Mage was quite surprised at the fear his doll was showing, and gave the fox a few belly scratches. He contemplated what he was going to say before shrugging, deciding that if he was captured or failed this mission, he was probably going to die anyway, and might, as well, say it. He gave the doll a warm smile, and answered, Kyuubi-kun, I wanted to tell you that I'm thankful that I had a companion like you throughout most of my life. You're the greatest doll I could have wished for, and I'm actually quite glad you were sealed inside me. If not, I may have fallen to the lies and deceit of this village, and become yet another mindless drone willing to throw their lives away for the decrepit council. With that said, he gave the fox doll a reassuring hug before setting out. He swore he would complete this mission and come out alive. Konoha streets. Nobody really noticed a flicker of black as it weaved its way through the crowd, hopping from shadow to shadow so as to not arouse suspicion. Every now and then a speck of red or purple would appear along with the black, but it would be gone so quickly it was as if it never existed. The figure was searching all over for the elusive Jounin who he was sure had the day off for the day, and he was determined to find him. He checked high and low, near and far, and even checked through the Hokage tower, and asked the aged man where he could find Haddock. The Hokage had given him a quizzical look before he elaborated. I'm determined to see underneath that mask. Rumor states that not even Hyugas can look under it. Sarutobi's eyes widened in shock before his voice broke the silence. Are you mad? Nobody ever came back alive and unharmed after those missions. They all failed horribly. The Black Mage nodded, pure determination sparkling through his odd eyes. I know, and I'm well aware, but I'm positive that I will be the one to find out what's underneath that mask. If only to get some blackmail on the Jounin. Sarutobi sighed wearily, knowing he would be unable to dissuade the blonde, temporarily raven-haired teen. His thoughts ran rampant on the subject, as he seemed to age decades, as he contemplated what to do, before he nodded, mostly to himself. You can find him at the memorial stone. He's usually there. Naruto gave the man a slight salute, before disappearing in a black void, leaving no trace behind. The Sandaime leaned back in his chair, sending his prayers with the young man who seemed to be doomed. A thought broke through his reverent silence, startling him. What the hell am I going to tell Jiraiya when he asks where Naruto is so that he can train him? My student can't train someone who's dead. Damn it, this means more paperwork. At the memorial stone. The Black Mage landed soundlessly on a tree branch, studying his gray-haired sensei with a wary eye. The man wouldn't be that bad if he didn't have that retarded grudge against him. Well, that's not entirely true, as he was still a hypocrite who didn't follow his own saying of those who break the rules are trash, but those who abandon their teammates are worse than trash, and he was a dishonorable thief. Come to think of it, wasn't he rivals with Mito Guy, a Taijutsu specialist? He almost shuddered to think of how many Taijutsu styles he learned inexplicably quickly throughout his career from sparring matches with the eccentric spandex-loving Dot. Poor man. Not even his extreme amounts of youthfulness can't save him from the Sharingan. Did I just refer to that as youthfulness? Fuck. I need to quit spending time around Konoha. That spandex virus is starting to infect me. He gave a violent shudder when he thought of what he would look like in green spandex, before a devilish glint lit up his eyes. He kept his voice as a soft murmur as he whispered conspiratorially with his plush toy, his eyes widened in the pure deviance of what the teen was saying. The fox broke out into a maniacal grin, his tails twitching in anticipation, as they refined their mission objectives a little, and disappeared to make accommodations. Ai's living quarters. Naruto found it actually quite easy to disable the traps and alarm systems on Guy's apartment, guessing that the man really didn't have that many enemies wanting to kill him. Or, more likely, they were too afraid of what his living quarters would be, should his eccentric ways be any indicator of how his entire life would be. The Taijutsu master really did have a rather odd internal designer. More likely, the man declared having an internal designer, as well as a fashion sense, as youthful, and did it all himself. The walls of his apartment were painted in the exact shade of green as his spandex suit, and had hundreds of weights stacked all around the walls in varying densities, anything from a tiny weight that weighed 40 pounds, obviously to slip into a weight belt, to weights designed for lifting. A bit less dense than the tinier ones. There were a few books in a bookshelf, mainly on muscle training theory or Taijutsu exercises. There was a sheaf of papers on top of a desk along with a reading light. He looked over on silent footsteps as he read over the title, and realized that Guy was actually writing a book. A training manual, to be exact, on the uses of the celestial gates, as well as their pros and cons. However, it suggested constantly wearing a green spandex bodysuit, as one of the precursors to the training regime, and the title was a bit off. You and your youthfulness. The Guide to the Springtime of Youth. Using the Celestial Body Gates by Mito Guy. The doll on his head shuddered heavily, as he thought of all the impressionable children that could be corrupted by this book in progress. Naruto, however, thought it was a rather nice gesture of the man, although done a bit oddly. He obviously had quite a bit of knowledge on what he was doing, if all these detailed notes on how each and every gate affects someone meant something. He supposed the shiny bowl cut, green spandex suit, and incredibly sparkly teeth were just a quirk of the Taijutsu master, and shrugged it off. Most Jounins had something to deal with the stress of killing people for money, and he couldn't fault them for the different ways that they chose to express it. He continued on his search, finally finding the man's closet. He opened the door with a feeling of intense dread, almost terrified of what might be hidden within. After he fully opened the door, he almost fell to the floor in shock of what he was seeing. Guy had normal clothing. Not just any normal clothing, but actual stylish normal clothing. Sure, there were around 4 spandex bodysuits, as the man obviously had great hygiene, if the absolutely luminous teeth were anything to go by, but the rest of the closet was full of great clothing. The doll actually fell off his head in pure awe at the spectacle, but he was able to catch the plush toy before he impacted with the floor. Quickly deciding that his respect to the spandex-clad Jounin raised several notches, he crossed off one of the routes to go about his new plan with Haddock. He refused to steal from this man, as he obviously A. had some sort of dignity, as he had normal clothing, B. had great pride in his work, and wanted to pass it on to others who he couldn't manually teach, and C. damn, he wanted to learn how to make his teeth that shiny. He set off towards Training Ground 27, where he knew Team 9 was training, intent on asking the Jounin a question or two. Training Ground 27, about 11 AM. Naruto appeared within a swirl of snow, shocking the ninja team there. He had been working on his ice manipulation after being given the hint by Haku, and was able to make a shunshin out of it, much to his delight. A little known fact about Naruto is that he really loves his different teleportation techniques, and strives to come up with new ones to offset the standard smoker swirl of leaves that everyone else in Konoha does. Guy regarded the newcomer warily, as Naruto had dropped the weave of mana over his hair once he changed his mind about stealing from the spandex Jounin. The Taijutsu master had heard about his eternal rival, Kakashi's eccentric student, but hearing and seeing are two different things. Firstly, the boy obviously was quite advanced, as he had not only had a flawless shunshin, but he was able to interchange elemental effects with it. The boy also displayed exemplary control, as well as multiple elemental affinities, and showed that he was completely unbiased and reactionary in any of the situations he was placed in. He decided to give the team the benefit of the doubt, and disregarded the fox plush doll on his head, having seen odder things in his time of being a ninja. Tenten, the weapons mistress, was quite intrigued with the newcomer. She had heard from several loose-tongued ninja around the village that there was a blonde-haired demon walking around, but she couldn't see anything wrong with Yamanaka Ino, aside from the banshee squealing and fangirlism, so this was the only other person with blonde hair, sans the Yamanaka clan, in the village. She inspected him, her incredible eyesight, gained from years of throwing different weapons for perfect accuracy with any given weapon. Whether it was meant to be a projectile or not, taking in almost unnoticeable details. The teen was obviously fit, if the toned stomach meant anything, though he didn't have the bulk, as she called it, of her teammate Leah her sensei, Guy. His muscles were lean and wiry, lending him flexibility and evasion, as well as precision-based combat, instead of heavy hand-to-hand combat. His long golden blonde hair looked to be not uncared for, but definitely not high on his priority list. She oddly wondered that, if he had long hair, but didn't worship it like others do, why did he keep it at that length? She pushed that thought to the side, as she continued her observation. The blonde's rather odd eyes had the weirdest shade of purple, and she had seen weird shades of purple before. Her teammate, Hyuga Niji, had nearly white purple eyes, and the entirety of the Hyuga clan had some shade of lavender for eyes. This teen's eyes were an almost jewel-like shade of amethyst, and looked quite shielded from the outside world. He showed no emotion on his noble-looking face, but didn't give off an air of superiority like the Uchiha Hyuga. He simply seemed neutral. His clothing seemed a little odd, with wide, flowing sleeves, as well as revealing his stomach, and a way his shinobi pants rode low on his hips, but she was used to odd clothing. Her eyes also rested on the Kyuubi doll on his head, which she could have sworn gave her a smile when she finished her inspection, but she convinced herself it was just a doll. Lee was beaming a grin worthy of Guy himself, wondering how this newcomer could appear without so much as a hint of his approach, something that should have made him quite wary. However, he simply saw it as a possible partner for sparring. Niji gave the teen a glare, his inner Niji screaming inside his head about how he spent so much time making his dark brown hair as silky and shiny as it is, but this newcomer had even better hair than he. He was about to go into his brooding mode, with angst levels clearly surpassing that of the last Uchiha, when he realized that the boy didn't even seem to care about his own appearance, as if his hair was just naturally perfect. This, of course, pushed his angst levels to much higher than normal, causing the grass around him to wilt and decay. Breaking the awkward silence, Naruto decided that he would be polite, and not blunt for once, as he was still trying to ascertain if his respect for the green-clad Jounin was well placed. Hello, Gai-san. Please forgive me for my sudden intrusion, but I was wondering, since Haddock-san seems to be busy either brooding over the memorial stone, or training the Uchiha when he thinks nobody is looking, if I might observe how a real team interacts. I arrived in Konoha on the day of the Genin exam, and, though I am a newcomer, I am quite sure my team is not exactly satisfactory in teamwork. I was notably surprised, as the stories he had heard from Kakashi always detailed the teen to be a wolf in sheepskin, as it were. The gray-haired Jounin was positive his student's animated doll was either the Kyuubi, or he himself was the Kyuubi. Speaking of the doll, it was noticeably inanimate at the moment, and he was curious as to how the blonde manipulated it, wondering if perhaps it was a form of the Kugutsu puppetry technique. Adopting a rare serious face, the Jounin nodded a bit before responding. Sure thing, Naruto-san. May I ask a question first? The blonde gave the man a slight twitch of his lips, and only Guy and Tenten's eyes caught the movement on the normally immobile face. Using their experience with Niji, a stoic, yet arrogant, Hyuga, they realized the blonde was giving a slight impression of acceptance. Before they could ponder more, the enigmatic teen had answered. Of course, Guy-san. What would you like to know? The spandex-clad Jounin tried to think of a way to phrase his question without it seeming too blunt or beast. He finally decided that he might, as well, just ask the question without flowery language, getting the impression that the teen's mind tended to rip apart what people say to find exactly what they're asking regardless. I have heard stories about how you fight. I was wondering how, if it was true, that you animate your doll, and if so, how you were able to do so. From what Kakashi said, it seemed as if there were no chakra strings to be a Kugutsu, making it quite an interesting ability. Tenten, Lee, and Niji were shocked at this, and the doll on the boy's head seemed to nod appreciably at the Jounin. The blonde struck a slight thinking pose, as if deciding whether to answer or not. Finally deciding that the green-clad man hadn't done anything to irritate him yet, he might as well give him the same answer he gave Haku. I have a rare bloodline that gives me extreme elemental control, as well as allowing me to animate inanimate objects. Fortunately for me, yet unfortunately for Haddock-san, his Sharingan was unable to copy any of my abilities when he decided he would try to inspect them without my knowledge, when I was engaged in a water battle with a Nukenin on our C-rank mission. I was immediately suspicious of this ability, as he wasn't just a Taijutsu fanatic. He found many interesting things when he researched ancient Taijutsu styles, and one of the things he had heard was the stories of a fabled set of warriors who used elemental techniques without hand seals, and tended to use something to help channel their energy. Most notably, they used staves, rods, or dolls. He was also shocked at the lack of honor his eternal rival had shown, attempting to steal techniques from one of his own students. While his 3 students seemed shocked at the bloodline the boy had, he decided to ask another question, before basing his opinions. Naruto-san, would you agree to spar with me, so that I might see how this bloodline works in battle? I have to admit it piqued my interest, and it would be helpful for my students to increase their youthfulness, while watching such an interesting fighting style. The serious face of the spandex man seemed to slip a little at the last bit, causing Naruto's lips to twitch once again. The doll on his head seemed to be holding back a snicker, if Guy's eyes could read the movements correctly. The blonde tapped an index finger to his chin, before pulling the doll off his head, and setting it on the ground, where it stood stock still. As you wish, Guy-san. Hand to hand, doll to hand, or full-out combat. The Jounin, seeing a chance to see each aspect of the supposed bloodline, decided on a hidden option. How about hand to hand first, then doll to hand, then all-out combat? Most people with bloodlines will focus solely on the bloodline abilities, and neglect their other talents, and if your bloodline is how you say it is, I would expect you to be a bit shoddy with your Taijutsu. Perhaps I could help you with it. Naruto gave a slight smirk, as he realized what the Jounin was playing at. The odd man seemed to actually have a hint of what he actually was, and he had to admit his respect grew from the observance. He wondered where he might have come across the information, but if he was correct, the man must try to revive ancient Taijutsu styles, and may have come across black mages mentioned in history. He nodded his head politely, and assumed a stance, which he could tell from the man's slight widening of his eyes, that he recognized it. I indeed recognizes it. It was a truly ancient hand-to-hand style, the name lost to the history books, and he had been studying it for the past few months, as its potential was quite large. It encompassed flexibility, evasion, deflection, and precise strikes meant to cause intense pain to aggravate and cripple opponents. It required such immense training and flexibility that it was nearly impossible to copy it, however, and made it quite good against Sharingan users, as they couldn't fight your style with the same style, unless they wanted to hurt themselves in the attempt. Dai shifted into his Goken, strong fist, stance, and his Genin team moved to the trees. The two stood there for what seemed like hours, before a single leaf fluttered from a tree, and they sprang into action. The doll, sensing it wasn't needed quite yet, hopped up into the trees with the Genin team, scaring them a bit, though Niji wouldn't admit it, and hopped into Tenten's lap, watching the fight. I was quite surprised, as the boy seemed to have trained in this style for over a decade, as he fluidly dodged, deflected, and blocked his powerful kicks and punches. The boy's pure flexibility surprised him, as it matched even with the body augmentations that Orochimaru used, though he was sure the boy had nothing of the sort done to him. He nearly marveled at the flexibility, as the boy twisted his spine at an unhealthy angle, dodging a kick to his midsection, and delivering swift jabs to the insides of his thighs, as well as the sides of his knees, in turn. I wasn't a jounin for nothing, however, and he was able to swiftly slam the lancing pain that was trying to disorient him out of his mind, concentrating on getting a good spar out of this. The two continued their Taijutsu spar for about 10 minutes, each giving as good as they got, though neither took it too far. It was merely a spar to compare styles, so Guy didn't remove his weights or open gates. If he had, he would have won purely by how much more experience he had in the realm of Taijutsu. They both separated, breathing lightly. Guy had some swiftly purpling bruises from the accurate strikes of the Black Mage, while the blonde had a cracked rib or two, as well as quite a few bruises of his own, quite a bit bigger than Guy's. The doll hopped out of Tenten's lap, and jumped into Naruto's arms, who looked strangely satisfied at having a challenge to fight. Guy was the one who spoke first, his serious facade crumbling underneath the exuberance of finding someone who had successfully revived such an ancient style. Yosh, Naruto-kun, your youthfulness burns brightly. I have only heard legends of that style, and that it was incredibly dangerous to train in. How is it that you were able to use that style to its fullest? The blonde's stoic demeanor lifted a little, and a sad smile tugged at the edges of his lips, startling observant viewers. I was taught by my caretaker and mentor from when I was 3 to when I was 14. She had insisted that, since my bloodline is range-oriented, that I have a solid foundation in evading hand-to-hand combat, while making sure that I would be well defended should I be unable to escape close range. I nodded his head a little, his youthfulness slipping back into the next place, as he was getting quite excited at this fight. She must have been quite a youthful woman, Naruto-kun. Yosh. On to the next part. Dull to hand combat. Send it to me with, as much as you have, Naruto-kun. The spandex-wearing jounin could have sworn he felt a malicious smirk coming from the doll, and the blonde nodded, his indifferent demeanor back into place. A pale violet aura flickered to life behind Naruto, as he backflipped away, dropping the doll in midair. The doll sprang to life, sprinting towards Guy at near jounin level speeds, and shocking the man slightly. He started to dodge as many of the attacks as he could, dishing a few kicks back when he could, though the 9 tails, as well as the sharp plush teeth, left very few gaps in the offense. Each of the tails caused crater-like dents in the ground, startling all but Naruto, and the doll itself with the power packed within the doll, and causing the jounin to regard it with a bit of caution. Naruto, as Kyuubi was fully in control of his own movement for the fight, was wondering if he could give the jounin a better fight with the doll. It was quite small, too small to fight effectively, and obviously the man wanted to inspect how the doll could fight. He thought about it for a little, before he grinned, as he remembered something he had heard from Lulu back when they were training. The only limits to black magic are your imagination. However, black magic can never delve into the realm of healing, as that is governed by white magic. No black magic spell has the possibility of healing, but aside from that, the possibilities are endless. When you want to create your own spells, you must think of what you want them to do, before opening your mind to the possibilities to meet those ends. Allow your instinct to guide you, but always make sure that you are able to guide your instinct, as well. He started to meditate for a moment, before the answer popped into his mind. The violet aura flared to life around him, darkening a little, as he started to fabricate the spell. Guy noticed this, and wondered what the boy was doing, when the doll stopped in place, as if frozen. Kyuubi, feeling the spell starting to affect him, had stopped, and wondered what the boy was up to now. As the ground sped further, and further away from his muzzle, he realized. The boy was making him grow, so as to give his opponent a better advantage. He could almost chuckle in delight at this, as he never really liked having an underhanded advantage, his attack on Konoha a notable exception. The doll was around 4 feet tall now, about 5 feet from nose to tail base, and each tail was about 6 feet long. The observing genins were quite shocked, as was Guy. Naruto could have cackled in glee at how his spell worked, before speaking loud enough for Team 9 to hear him. I felt that the doll's small stature was an unfair advantage for me, Guy-san, so I decided to try to increase its size. Now you can fight it effectively, however, it will be more powerful at the cost of the small target and nimble efficiency it had before. The jounin nodded, in slight awe of what the team was able to do, before continuing the fight. The doll really was quite a bit stronger than before, the slight dents in the ground becoming full craters, and trees nearly splintered under the might of the tails whipping towards him. One of the notable disadvantages of fighting a doll, however, was the fact that it wasn't human. It didn't tire, it didn't feel pain, and most of all, it didn't have bones to break, which was one of the biggest advantages of Goken. Boken focuses on bludgeoning force, snapping bones beneath their strong strikes, and causing their opponent physical damage. Against the doll it was quite useless. About 5 minutes later, a heavily breathing guy called for a halt, and Naruto beckoned the doll to come towards him. The fox plush, while quite large, still had a soft spot for ear scratches it seems, as the fox's tail started to twitch side to side in happiness, as Naruto busied himself with scratching, while Guy got his breath back to normal. It took about 10 minutes for the man to get his second wind, and the doll was safely back in Naruto's arms, back to his smaller state. The Jounin was feeling quite exhilarated, though a bit scared, of what the boy would be like in all-out combat. The boy was clearly at least Jounin in strength, though it seems Kakashi hadn't taught him at all, or even attempted to. He was quite disappointed by his rival at how he let such a prize slip through his grasp. His genin were wide-eyed in shock, and all the genin who had to be only a year younger than them. He showed that he was quite capable in Taijutsu, and his doll could easily fight on par with Guy, when he still had his weights on. And that was only one facet of his bloodline. He had said that he had extreme manipulation over all the elements, and they were both a little afraid, and a little excited, to see what happened next. Naruto, deciding that the man really had earned his respect, politely spoke up in a softly amused tone. Gai-san, if we continue, I'm afraid that I won't be able to prevent this training area from being destroyed. Due to my elemental manipulation, I specialize in wide-scale demolition. If Haddock-san told you anything about our encounters during the C-rank mission, surely he told you what happened when I was faced with opponents. The Jounin blinked a little, before his eyes whitened a bit in recollection. Kakashi had stated that his blonde student was a demon when it came to the battlefield, stating that the abilities he had were nothing short of cage-level destruction. He had said that the blonde had wiped out a full army of mercenaries, as well as their boss, with one technique. Deciding that discretion was the better part of valor, he wondered if he could perhaps compromise. You have a point, Naruto-san. Would it be possible for you to show some of your techniques, though? I haven't seen anyone able to accomplish much with pure elemental manipulation alone. The only Jounin in Konoha that can do much at all with just the manipulation is Saratobi Asuma, a trench knife specialist who uses his wind element to enhance the length and sharpness of his knives. The blonde thought about it for a moment, before nodding, and responding with the question. Small explosions, bigger destruction, or wide-scale devastation? I thought about it for a moment, before nodding his head to himself. The best you have. To a point, of course, as I don't wish this training ground to be destroyed. The black mage's purple eyes seemed to sparkle with impish delight, as he gave a decisive nod, setting the toy on the ground in front of him. The dark purple power surged, and flickered around him for a moment, as he raised a single hand into the air. The doll's tail sprang to life, flicking side to side in a hypnotic manner. A word escaped the teen's lips, as he named off his technique before results were shown.
That's it for today guys. I hope you enjoyed my video and see you in the next part of this video. Till then, sayonara.